Steve Bannon, I would imagine, has to be on his way out. There's been rumors for a long time that Bannon is on the chopping block. No doubt that hashtag President Bannon thing that happened in the winter was upsetting to Trump because Trump is a insecure baby and freaks out, and any potential undermining of his leadership and his ego. And it's no secret. I mean, the thing about Steve Bannon, and I'm just saying this clinically and objectively, Steve Bannon is probably there are a bunch of total clowns and D-string people in the Trump White House. Then there's some military guys who have a very dangerous military-industrial complex agenda, but have a sense of competence and basic professionalism that might rein Trump in. Then you have Tillerson, who's actually pretty marginalized, but is a traditional just sort of oil empire guy. And then then you have Cohn and Mnuchin, who are just, and then Wilbur Ross, just kind of, corporate scumbags.
The globalist.
The globalist. Steve Bannon is a bigot, dangerous. He's also definitely, he's probably the most sort of appropriately situated in the White House. He does have some strategic understanding. He did have a very astute insight of running Breitbart as an extremist tabloid, which appealed to xenophobia and bigotry, and then also setting up a low-key nonprofit which put out that Clinton Cash book as a sober piece of investigative reporting, but still a lot of that reporting was totally garbage and discredited, and getting a partnership with the New York Times. He knew that in order to seed stories in the mainstream, you needed to present them in a much less rabid manner. And anyways, yesterday, he tracked down Robert Kuttner. Now, Robert Kuttner is an editor at the American Prospect, a venerable old liberal writer. I shouldn't say old, I guess that's rude, but a veteran liberal writer. He's been around for a while. Smart guy, edits the American Prospect, good, liberal journal in Washington, known in our sort of circles, and doesn't have a particularly big kind of national profile, but highly, highly respected. Steve Bannon tracked down a column that Robert Kuttner wrote about North Korea, where Kuttner, in fact, insulted his boss. This is a quote from Kuttner's original column. In Kim, Trump has met his match. The risk of two arrogant fools blundering into nuclear exchange is more serious than at any time since October 1962. Well, that's exactly right. And Kuttner explains that he was very surprised when he got an email from Bannon's assistant that Bannon wanted to speak to him. And his first thought was maybe Bannon wanted to, chew him out on the phone. They ended up getting on the phone, and Bannon said, it's a great honor to finally track you down. I've been following your writing for years, and I think you and I are on the same boat when it comes to China. You absolutely nailed it. And then Bannon goes on to actually explain in a nativist and in light of other things he said about the fact that we're definitely going to have a war with China, some rather disturbing comments indicating his attitude with China. But the basic read that actually China in some ways benefits from this stalemate and is kind of riding off of mutually assured destruction as to nothing actually happening. He told Kuttner, in clear contradiction of fire and fury, that there was no military option to North Korea and that they needed to think about potentially sanctioning China and taking on China directly to solve the issue. He then bragged about all of the people that he was marginalizing in defense, treasury, and state departments, which does seem a little bit contradictory for his sort of the adamant denials that he's one of the prime White House leakers and using leaking to undermine people like McMaster. And of course, Kuttner, asked him, since he had him on the phone, about racism and ethno-nationalism, because, as of course Bannon bragged when he was running Breitbart, that Breitbart was a platform for the alt-right. And he dismissed, and I'm quoting now from Kuttner, he dismissed the far right as irrelevant and sidestepped his own role in creating it. ethno-nationalism, this is Bannon. Ethno-nationalism, it's for losers. It's a fringe element. And I think the media plays it up too much. We got to help crush it, help crush it more. And Kuttner had a great line which said, from Bannon's lips to Trump's ear. And then he said, the more Democrats talk about identity and they want to talk about racism every day, if the left is going to focus on race and identity and we go with economic nationalism, we crush the Democrats. I think that there is you can hear in Bannon that if he had a disciplined, intelligent president, he could have an incredibly dangerous strategy that could actually implement a form of economic populist fascism. But all the highfalutin talk, the occasional insight, and him being completely unhinged, there was something that Bannon forgot to do, which was that say he was off the record and not being interviewed. So now this is blowing up all over the place, and this punches all of Trump's biggest buttons. He undermined him in North Korea. He spoke essentially, and Kuttner noted this, as if he was the president. And then weirdly, considering his background in the formation of bigotry and racism, spoke out much more clearly on, I will reiterate, the losers that were in Charlottesville. So if he doesn't get fired, how many copies of a theoretical tape of sex games and peeing does Steve Bannon have? Did Putin give him the tape directly? This is a clip of that happened on MSNBC this morning with Axios reporter Jonathan Swain talking with Brian Williams about how Bannon was almost certainly blindsided by what happened with the American prospect.
Jeremy Peters of the New York Times is standing by to talk to us. But in this first one, tell the folks who haven't had the benefit of reading it, that quote was the tip of the iceberg. What else is in here? What else is in here about the military and North Korea?
So I should tell you that that piece that you quoted that I wrote this evening has just been updated because Steve Bannon has told associates that he actually didn't know he was being interviewed. He was calling up this person who wrote the piece about China, thinking that he was talking to a China ally, and for whatever reason did not say that it was off the record, and looks pretty bad. Now, it's actually an extraordinary interview. When I read it, I had a very strong feeling that Steve Bannon didn't know he was being interviewed because he did a few things that he wouldn't normally do, even when he's in his blustery, I want to show you, how big my muscles are mode. He spoke like he was the president. And that is a really big sin in Trump world. He talked about things that he would do, people and staff that he would remove from the State Department. He undercut the president's policy on North Korea. He said there is no military option, that there was no way to solve this militarily, which is directly contradictory to Donald Trump's fairly bombastic rhetoric. And then he started trashing colleagues. He said he was in a war with Gary Cohn and the Goldman Sachs crew. We knew all of this stuff, but for him to say it to someone that he's never spoken to before, you're going to hear some people say that he's playing some kind of, I called it five-dimensional chess, that this is part of a devious strategy. I guarantee you it's not. It's just plain sloppiness.
Well, guess what, Mr. Swain? There is one person who does think that this is five or maybe even six or maybe even 10-dimensional chess, and that is a reporter or journalist or commentator, whatever the fuck we're going to call you, who I think has much more credibility than you, super producer Matt Leck with a theory.
I mean, I'm not certain on this, but I think it might just be chess. I think Bannon knows he's out because as we started this week with him fighting McMaster and others, he's trying to make it so it's not, oh, we're going to get rid of him because white nationalism freak out. It's because he has these positions that are more respectable.
Right. I think that's a good theory. So, but then what? Because I think that one of the reasons that it is genuinely scary for them to get rid of Bannon is that Bannon is obviously, he's adept at media, and there is a certain contingent, and this is a weird thing here because his contingent is part of that racist base that he's cultivated. And I think that they're afraid of alienating those people. But if he's positioning it as, I'm actually not into I'm into, I'm an economic nationalist, not an ethno-nationalist. And so I'm out because I've been fighting a valiant war against the establishment. It kind of puts him in an interesting position on the other side of it, because presumably he's going to want to rally the troops and, kind of get some revenge, but he's calling his troops losers.
Which makes it easier for them to fire him.
Yeah. Unless he has a P-tape.
Yeah, we'll see.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos